Hi everyone, and welcome to episode 2 of Clay and Cleaver. This time I'm sculpting the Freddy Phone, as I call it, a replica of the prop used in A Nightmare on Elm Street in this scene. This was a commission piece, and I was so excited to be asked to make something based on A Nightmare on Elm Street. While I was gathering reference photos, I came across an interview with Wes Craven where he said his inspiration for the movie came from some news articles about young men dying in the middle of nightmares. I thought that would be a great topic for a Clay and Cleaver video, so here we are. I'll be discussing these mysterious deaths, as well as some other nightmare-related stuff like sleep paralysis and demons. If you'd rather hear me talk about how I made the phone instead of nightmare fuel, you can have access to that video by joining my Patreon, which I have linked in the description. First, let's talk about these people who were dying during nightmares that Wes had read about. In 1981, the CDC began tracking a wave of sudden deaths of seemingly healthy young men that almost always occurred at night. The men affected were all immigrants from Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia, displaced by the Vietnam War. No other ethnic groups have been known to suffer from these sleeping deaths. Witnesses and medics described rigid limbs and jaw, excessive salivation, loss of bowel control, extremely labored breathing, heart fibrillations, and skin turning blue right before death. By 1988, over 100 men had died of this mystery affliction, and scientists were no closer to having any understanding of the cause. Autopsies were hard to obtain due to religious beliefs of the families and a shortage of medical facilities. When autopsies were performed, the victims' bodies were found to be in perfectly healthy condition, aside from the obvious. Scientists named it Sudden Unexpected Nocturnal Death Syndrome, or SUNS. SUNS is still not attributed to a specific cause. Some theories link the syndrome to stress caused by nightmares, but no scientific evidence supports this correlation. There's no treatment, and it is still unknown why this condition affects Southeast Asians so frequently. Some people thought that the cause was genetic predisposition or stress from the war and having to relocate to America, but some thought it was something a bit more supernatural. In Thailand, where it's called Lai Thai, sudden sleep deaths are brought on by the ghost of a widow searching the night for healthy young men to prey on. And in the Philippines, they call it Bangungut, which comes from root words meaning rise and moan. In these folk tales, Bangungut is blamed on a demon called Batibat, a fat woman who lives in trees. Her victims are people who cut down the trees she lives in to make their houses. She'll still dwell in the trees that made the house, and when someone falls asleep too close to her, she sits on their chest until they suffocate. Batibat parallels the succubus and incubus, two demons, or two forms of the same demon depending on who you're talking to, that sits on the chest of their victims until they die, often sexually assaulting them as well. The incubus is the male form of the demon that feeds on women, and succubus is the female form that preys on men. These demons could take human form by reanimating corpses and shape-shifting. The succubus, however, could also infiltrate a victim's dreams remotely. Some sources say the succubus lies with a man, takes his life force, and then morphs into incubus to fertilize a female with baby satans. Batibat, succubi, and incubi all crush their victims, suffocating them. This is a common feeling people who experience sleep paralysis also describe. Sleep paralysis, if you haven't had the pleasure of experiencing, is basically when you wake up out of a deep sleep after the brain has turned off the body's ability to move so you don't hurt yourself acting out your dreams. This leaves you awake, still dreaming, and unable to move. Sometimes hallucinations accompany sleep paralysis, including images of, you guessed it, succubi and incubi, as well as intruders in the room and other scary stuff. I've experienced sleep hallucinations since I was a kid, usually visions of a massive crawling bugs in my bed or a rotting skull next to my pillow, and I can tell you it's pretty scary. Luckily though, nobody has ever actually died because of a nightmare or sleep paralysis, although you might feel like you came close. And to circle back to A Nightmare on Elm Street and the sculpture, I think that's why this movie is so good. Everyone has experienced a nightmare, and the people who made it did a great job creating a character and a story that exploits those universal fears.